They say you die twice. Once when your heart stops, and again when the last person who knows your name forgets it. But in my line of work, we had a third kind of death, the retirement. That's when you vanish. You become a ghost in your own life, a piece of furniture that breathes. Waiting for the clock to run out, I perfected the art of being invisible 40 years ago in boardrooms where men decided the fate of nations over scotch and cigars. Back then, they called me the Sterling Fix. If a senator woke up next to a dead girl, or a tech CEO needed $1 billion embezzlement to look like a clerical error, they called Arthur Sterling. I didn't solve problems. I erased them. I spun narratives so tight they strangled the truth. Now I'm just Grandpa Artie, poor, trembling, half-deaf Artie who spills his soup and forgets what day it is. It's a good cover. The best I've ever constructed that I sat in my wingback chair, the leather worn smooth by decades of contemplation, and watched the dust motes dance in the shaft of afternoon light. This room, the library, was the only thing that still felt real. Floor-to-ceiling mahogany shelves, temperature controlled to a precise 68 degrees, humidity steady at 40%. They held 3,000 volumes, first editions, signed manuscripts, the history of human thought bound in calfskin and gold leaf. It was my late wife, Eleanor's, passion and my life savings. It was worth, conservatively, $2.5 million. To me, it was worth everything. The silence was shattered by the sound of a diesel engine groaning in the driveway. Then the slam of car doors. Voices. Jesus, look at this place. A male voice sneered. It was loud, projecting the way people speak when they think no one important is listening. It's like a mausoleum. Does he actually live here alone? Be nice, Julian. A softer voice replied. Chloe, my granddaughter. She meant well, I suppose, but she had the spine of a jellyfish. He's fragile. The doctors said the isolation is making his dementia worse. I adjusted my glasses, letting them sit slightly askew on my nose. I practiced the tremor in my right hand, a rhythmic, pitiable shaking that made holding a cup of tea an adventure. I slumped my shoulders, shrinking 2 inches in height. The heavy oak doors of the library swung open. Grandpa, Chloe called out. I waited 3 seconds, the perfect delay for a processing deficit, then turned my head slowly, blinking as if waking from a dream. Chloe, I quavered, my voice pitched high and thin. Is that you, dear? Is it Tuesday? It's Saturday, Grandpa, she said, rushing over to hug me. She smelled of vanilla and stress. We're here. We're finally moving in. Behind her stood the intruder, Julian Vance. He was 28, wearing a suit that was too tight and a watch that was too big. He had the polished, predatory look of a man who sold things that didn't exist to people who couldn't afford them. He was an influencer, Chloe had told me, an entrepreneur. My background check, conducted 3 months ago via a secure laptop in the basement, told me he was a failed cryptocurrency hustler with $85,000 in credit card debt and a lien on his BMW. He scanned my library not with reverence, but with calculation. His eyes didn't see literature. They saw square footage. Hey there, Arthur, Julian shouted, not bothering with the Mr. Sterling. He tapped his own ear sarcastically. We're the new roommates. Remember? I stared at him blankly, mouth slightly open. Who? The gardener? Julian chuckled, a dry, dismissive sound. He turned to Chloe. He's gone, babe. Lights are on, nobody's home. Look at this place, though. We could fit the whole studio setup in here if we cleared out these dusty old shelves. The acoustics would be killer for the podcast. My heart hammered a slow, cold rhythm against my ribs. Clear out the shelves. We are not clearing out the library, Julian, Chloe said, though her voice lacked conviction. He loves these books. Does he? Julian walked deeper into the room. He was holding a large plastic cup, sweating with condensation. Iced coffee. He looks like he hasn't read a page in 10 years. Probably just hoarding. Old people hoard. He stopped in front of the display case on the north wall. Inside, resting on a velvet pillow, was my most prized possession. A first edition of Great Expectations, 1861, the 3-volume set. It was pristine, unopened by clumsy hands. Julian leaned against the glass case. He took a sip of his drink, then set the plastic cup down, right on top of the mahogany display table, directly above the ventilation grate for the climate control. The condensation ring formed instantly on the wood, but that wasn't the danger. His elbow was resting inches from the glass latch. One slip, one careless gesture, and that sugary sludge would spill into the intake or onto the leather-bound spines below. "Please," I mumbled, pushing myself up from the chair with a groan of effort. The moisture. "Relax, Artie," Julian said, waving a hand without looking at me. He was busy typing on his phone. "It's just water. Wood dries." He shifted his weight. The cup wobbled. I didn't think. The mask slipped, just internally. The calculator in my brain ran the physics. If the cup fell to the left, it hit the floor. If it fell to the right, it splashed the 1861 Dickens. I lurched forward, amplifying my limp into a stumble. I flailed my arms, acting the part of the unsteady geriatric losing his balance. "Whoa!" I cried out. I crashed into the table, my hip checking the corner hard. The impact sent the cup flying deliberately to the left. It hit the Persian rug with a wet explosion of ice and brown liquid. "What the hell?" Julian jumped back, wiping coffee off his Italian loafers. "Watch it, you crazy old bat." I stood there, panting, clutching my cane, looking up at him with wide, watery eyes. I tripped. The rug, it's slippery." Julian looked at his shoes, then at me. His face twisted into a sneer of pure disgust. The veneer of politeness vanished. "You clumsy idiot," he hissed, stepping into my personal space. He lowered his voice so Chloe, who was in the hallway grabbing bags, wouldn't hear. "Look at this mess. You're useless, you know that? Just a useless waste of space." I stared at his neck. The carotid artery was pulsing right there. 40 years ago, I could have stopped it with a thumb press. Instead, I began to cry. Not real tears, of course, but the heaving, dry sobs of a confused old man. "I'm sorry," I wailed. "I'm so sorry." Chloe came running in. "Oh my God, Grandpa, are you okay?" "He attacked me," Julian said, holding up his hands, laughing nervously. "He just went berserk and knocked my drink over. I think he's sundowning Chloe. Serious aggression." Chloe looked at the mess, then at me, shaking and sobbing. She wrapped an arm around me. "He didn't mean it, Julian. It was an accident. Look at him." Julian wiped his shoe on the clean part of the rug, an antique silk hair-eyes worth $12,000. He stared at me, his eyes cold and dead. "Yeah," Julian muttered. "An accident. We're gonna have to do some serious baby proofing in here if we're gonna live with this." He looked around the library again, his gaze lingering on the shelves. "Starting with this junk heap. It smells like a funeral home." I buried my face in Chloe's shoulder to hide my expression. I wasn't crying. I was smiling. Because Julian Vance had just made his first mistake. He thought I was the victim. He didn't know that he had just walked into the spider's web. And the spider was very, very hungry and he wanted to clear the shelves? Fine, I would help him. But I wasn't going to clear the books. I was going to clear him. Sleep is a luxury for the innocent. For men like me, it's a tactical vulnerability. Even at 74, I sleep in 90-minute cycles, waking fully alert. Listening for the anomalies in the silence. It was 3 a.m., 4 days after the coffee incident. The house should have been dead quiet, but it wasn't. A sound drifted down the hallway, a dry, rhythmic scritch tear, like dry leaves being crushed under a boot. I sat up, sliding my feet into my slippers. I didn't turn on the lamp. I didn't need to. I knew the floor plan of this house down to the millimeter. I moved through the darkness, my tremor gone, my steps silent on the hardwood. The cane stayed by the bed. Tonight, I needed speed, not props. The library door was cracked open. A sliver of blue light spilled out, cutting across the hallway floor. I approached the gap and peered in with one eye. Julian was sitting at my desk, my sacred workspace where I had once drafted press releases that toppled CEOs. He had a ring light set up, casting a harsh, artificial glow on the mahogany surface. He was wearing white cotton gloves. For a second, I felt a flicker of hope. Gloves? Maybe he was respecting the collection? Maybe he was just looking. Then I saw the X-Acto knife. He had a book open in front of him. A massive folio, the Botanical Register of 1838. Hand-colored plates, one of only 50 copies in existence. Value, $40,000. Julian hummed to himself, bobbing his head to music coming from wireless earbuds. He pressed the blade into the gutter of the page. With a sickening zip, he sliced through the binding threads. He lifted the page, a beautiful illustration of a digitalis purpurea, and held it up to the light. Money. He whispered that he set the severed page onto a stack of others. Beside the stack lay a pile of cheap, black picture frames from a discount store. My stomach turned over. It wasn't just theft. Theft I could understand. Theft is logical. This was butchery. He was stripping the art to sell as vintage botanical prints on Etsy for $50 a pop, and discarding the text, the soul of the book, like trash. He grabbed the next page. Zip. Another tear. Another wound. I gripped the door frame, my knuckles white. The rage that flooded my veins was so pure, so hot, it almost made me dizzy. This wasn't just paper. That book was a gift from Eleanor on our 30th anniversary. She had tracked it down in a dusty shop in London. She had held it like a newborn baby. Zip. Julian tossed the now empty leather binding onto the floor. It landed with a hollow thud, a carcass stripped of its meat. Ugly old trash, he muttered, kicking the spine under the desk. Who reads this garbage anyway? I wanted to storm in there. I wanted to break his fingers one by one. I wanted to take that X-Acto knife and carve respect into his forehead. But I froze. I forced my breathing to slow. Inhale for 4. Hold for 4. Exhale for 4. If I went in there now, what would happen? I'd yell. He'd deny it. He'd say I gave him permission in one of my confused states. Chloe would believe him because she wanted to believe the best in everyone. Or worse, he'd realize I wasn't as frail as I looked. If he knew I was sharp, he'd be careful. A fixer doesn't act on emotion. A fixer gathers leverage. I backed away from the door, silent as a shadow. I retreated to my bedroom and sat on the edge of the mattress, staring at the wall. He was destroying the legacy. He was getting my history for pocket change. Okay, Julian, you want to play with paper? I'll play with paper. I opened the bottom drawer of my nightstand. Underneath a stack of moth-eaten sweaters was a false bottom. I popped it open. Inside sat my old toolkit, a burner phone, a cryptographically secure USB drive, and a small, black notebook that hadn't seen the light of day since 1999. I opened the notebook. It was blank. I had burned the real one years ago, but Julian didn't know that. I needed to see exactly how far this rot went. I needed audio. I needed video. I needed to let him hang himself with his own arrogance. I picked up the burner phone. It was dead, of course. I plugged it in. Tomorrow the tremor would be worse. Tomorrow I would be extra confused. I would ask him if he'd seen my botanical register. I would watch him lie to my face. And while he lied, I would be activating the cameras. The library wasn't a sanctuary anymore. It was a kill box, and he had just walked into the center of it. Paranoia is just a heightened state of awareness. That's what I used to tell my clients. Now it was my survival strategy. The next morning, while Chloe and Julian were out brunching on my credit card, I went to work. I didn't have my old team, no tech wizards, no surveillance vans. I had Amazon Prime and a soldering iron. I spent 3 hours installing the baby monitors. These weren't the cheap plastic toys you buy for a nursery. These were high-fidelity, pinhole audio-visual units I'd stripped from a defunct security system years ago and kept in a shoebox labeled denture supplies. I placed one inside the hollow bronze bust of Shakespeare on the mantelpiece. Another went behind the spine of a dummy book on the third shelf, The Decline and Fall of the Roman Empire, appropriately. The third, I slid under the desk. Secured with gaffer tape, I synced the feeds to an encrypted cloud server. Accessible only via a tablet I kept hidden inside a hollowed-out orthopedic pillow. By the time they returned, I was back in my armchair, drooling slightly, watching a muted rerun of Matlock. Grandpa, Chloe breezed in, dropping keys on the hall table. We brought you a croissant. It's almond. Almond, I mumbled, making a show of adjusting my hearing aid. I don't need any ointment. Julian followed her in, laughing. He's in rare form today, Chloe. God, it smells like old soup in here. Be nice, she chided, but she was already checking her phone. Distracted, Julian wandered into the library. I watched him on the tablet screen hidden under my blanket. The feed was crisp, 4K resolution. I could see the pores on his nose. He pulled out his phone and dialed. He paced around the room, touching things. He picked up a first edition Hemingway, weighed it in his hand, and tossed it onto the desk like a frisbee. Yo, Marcus, Julian said into the phone. The audio from the under-desk bug was crystal clear. Yeah, I got another batch. The botanical prints are already up on the shop. I'm thinking we price them at 80 a pop. Framed. He paused, listening. The covers. Julian laughed. Trash, man. I'm telling you, the old man is brain dead. He thinks the maid moved them. I told him he lost them. He cried for 20 minutes. It was pathetic. My hand tightened around the tablet under the blanket. Pathetic. Yeah, Julian continued, kicking the leg of my desk. Listen, about the engagement party next Saturday. I want a bonfire. Yeah, in the backyard. It's rustic chic. We need fuel, right? I've got stacks of these gutted books. Just the covers and the text blocks. We'll burn them. Symbolism, bro out with the old, in with the new. Rising from the ashes. He laughed again. A cruel, barking sound. No, Chloe won't care. She does whatever I tell her. She thinks I'm her ticket to the high life. Once the old guy kicks it, which shouldn't be long if I stress him out enough, the house is ours. Then we bulldoze this library and build the studio. He sat down in my chair. He put his feet up on my desk. I'm telling you, Marcus, it's the perfect crime. The victim doesn't even know he's a victim. He's just a vegetable waiting to be composted. I closed my eyes. The rage was different now. It wasn't hot anymore. It was cold. Absolute zero. He wasn't just stealing. He was planning to burn the words. He was planning to dance on the ashes of my life to impress his sycophant friends. And he was hastening my death to do it. I pulled the earbud out of my ear. I looked at the almond croissant Chloe had left on the side table. I wasn't a vegetable, Julian. I was the gardener, and I had found a weed that I reached for my cane and stood up, letting the joints crack loudly. I shuffled toward the library door. Julian, I called out, my voice trembling perfectly. Julian, are you in there? I can't find my glasses. Inside the library, Julian scrambled. I heard him whisper, gotta go, and hang up. He opened the door. A fake smile plastered on his face. Right here, Artie. What's the matter? Lose your marbles again? My glasses, I whimpered. And, have you seen the big green book? The one with the flowers? I wanted to show Chloe. Julian leaned down, getting right in my face. He smelled of expensive cologne and deceit. You lost it, Artie, he said slowly, like speaking to a child. Remember? You took it to the park and left it on a bench. You were crying about it yesterday. I stared into his eyes. I let my lip quiver. I did. Yep, you did. He patted my cheek. Don't worry. It was just an old book. Nobody cares. Okay. I whispered. Okay. I turned and shuffled away. Protocol Zero, I thought. Total annihilation. I didn't just need to stop him. I needed to turn him into a pariah. I needed to make sure that when he fell so hard he cracked the pavement that it was time to open the safe. That night, the house breathed with the heavy, rhythmic snoring of the younger generation. Julian and Chloe were asleep, confident in their dominion over my home. They thought they were living with a ghost. They didn't realize they were sleeping on top of a landmine. I waited until 3:30 a.m. The witching hour for the guilty and the old. I locked the library door from the inside, a simple brass bolt that Julian had already joked about picking with a paperclip. I moved to the far corner of the room, behind the rolling ladder. There, hidden behind a false panel of wainscoting that looked exactly like the rest of the wall, was a wall safe. It wasn't a modern digital safe. It was a Diebold from 1958. Mechanical, heavy, unhackable unless you had a stethoscope and 10 years of practice. I spun the dial. Left to 42, right to 18, left to 07. The tumblers clicked a sound like a breaking bone. The heavy steel door swung open. Inside lay the remnants of Arthur Sterling, the man who didn't exist anymore. A stack of gold Krugerrands, emergency currency. A pistol, which I would never use. Violence is a failure of imagination. And a collection of notebooks. I selected a specific one. It was bound in black moleskin, the leather cracked and faded. The smelled of old tobacco and secrets. It was blank. I sat at my desk. The same desk Julian had desecrated with his iced coffee, and turned on the green-shaded banker's lamp. I pulled a fountain pen from my pocket. Julian Vance was a simple creature. He was driven by greed and the desperate need to be perceived as important. He spoke in buzzwords: crypto, leverage, alpha. He believed the world was a cheat code waiting to be cracked. I needed to give him a cheat code. I opened the black book. I didn't write top secret or CIA on the pages. That was amateur hour. True power doesn't advertise itself. True power is boring. I began to write. I filled the first 10 pages with strings of alphanumeric text. To the untrained eye, specifically the eye of a desperate idiot like Julian, these looked like offshore bank account keys, or perhaps nuclear launch codes, or the login credentials for a dark web marketplace worth millions. In reality, I was copying the GPS coordinates of every Wendy's dumpster in the tri-state area, followed by random serial numbers I was reading off the back of my printer. That was the model number of my toaster. I wrote for 2 hours, my hands steady, my penmanship impeccable. I created a labyrinth of nonsense. I structured it to look like a ledger of bribes paid to high-ranking officials. I added initials next to the coordinates. SH, JB, MR, initials that could belong to senators or judges, or, in my case, the starting lineup of the 1986 New York Mets. Julian would see what he wanted to see. That is the first rule of the con. You don't sell the lie. You let the mark buy it. I closed the book. It looked heavy. It looked dangerous. Now, I had to plant the seed. The next morning, I initiated phase 1 of Protocol 0. I waited until Julian was in the kitchen, making his kale smoothie. The blender roared, but I knew he could hear me if I projected just right. I stood in the hallway, phone in hand, the landline, for authenticity. I dialed the speaking clock, but I spoke as if I were pleading for my life. No, I whispered, loud enough to carry. No, you don't understand. I can't find the key. If I open that safe, if I open it, they'll know. I paused, listening to the robotic voice tell me the time. The obsidian ledger, I said, my voice trembling with theatrical fear. Yes, I still have it. It's in the floor safe, but I can't move it. It's the only insurance I have left against the agency. I heard the blender stop. Silence in the kitchen. Please, I whimpered into the receiver. Don't come here. My granddaughter lives here now. I don't want her involved. The codes are safe. Nobody knows about the billions but me. I hung up the phone with a shaky hand. I leaned against the wall, breathing heavily, counting to 10.1, 2, 3. Grandpa. Julian's voice came from the kitchen doorway. He was holding his smoothie, but his knuckles were white around the glass. His eyes were wide, dilated with sudden, intense interest that I jumped, clutching my chest. Oh, Julian, you startled me. Who is on the phone, Artie? He asked, his voice casual, too casual. No one, I said too quickly. Just the pharmacy, asking about my ointment. Julian smiled. It was a shark smile. He walked over and put a hand on my shoulder. You sure, buddy? You sounded upset. Something about a safe? And billions? I pulled away, looking terrified. You didn't hear that. You didn't hear anything. Forget it, Julian. Please. It's just old man talk. I shuffled away as fast as my bad hip would allow, retreating to the library. I locked the door loudly. I went to the safe. I made a show of fiddling with the dial, then failing to open it. I slumped in my chair, head in hands that I checked the tablet hidden under the cushion. The camera feed from the hallway showed Julian standing exactly where I'd left him. He wasn't drinking his smoothie. He was typing furiously on his phone. He looked at the library door. He looked at the floorboards. The hook was set. The bait was in the water. Now, I just had to wait for him to bite. Greed acts on the human brain like a neurotoxin. It bypasses the frontal cortex, the part responsible for risk assessment and logic, and burrows straight into the reptilian stem. I've seen smart men sign their own death warrants for a 1% point on a stock option. Julian Vance wasn't a smart man to begin with, so the toxin worked fast. For the next 24 hours, the dynamic in the house shifted. Julian stopped treating me like a piece of furniture and started treating me like a fragile, ticking bomb made of gold. "Can I get you anything, Artie?" he asked, hovering over my armchair with a pitcher of water. "You look dehydrated. You need to keep your fluids up. Brain function, right?" "I'm fine," I mumbled, clutching a throw pillow to my chest like a shield. "Just the noise. The cars outside. Are they watching?" Julian stiffened. He glanced at the window. Who's watching?" "The men in the suits," I whispered, leaning in. "They know about the ledger, Julian. They know I moved the assets." Julian's eyes practically vibrated. "The ledger, right? The one with the billions." I pulled back, feigning sudden clarity and suspicion. "I didn't say that. Who told you that? You're one of them." No, Artie. I'm family." He patted my shoulder, his grip too tight. "I'm on your side. I want to help you protect it." I stared at him for a long moment, letting my jaw slacken. "Family. Yes, Chloe's boy, the gardener." He gritted his teeth but forced a smile. "Sure, the gardener. Just relax." He walked away, but he didn't go far. He stood in the hallway, pretending to text, watching me through the reflection in the hall mirror. I could feel his gaze. It was hungry that it was time to stage the main event. That I waited until the afternoon sun hit the library windows, casting long, dusty shadows across the Persian rug. I knew Julian was in the kitchen, ostensibly editing a video, but actually listening to every creak of the floorboards. I shuffled into the library and closed the door, but I didn't latch it. I left it a hair's breadth ajar, enough for sound to travel, enough for a pry eye to see through. I moved the heavy oak coffee table. It scraped loudly against the floor. Scritch. Thud. I paused. On my tablet, concealed in the magazine rack, I saw the kitchen feed. Julian's head snapped up. He muted his laptop. He crept toward the hallway. I got down on my hands and knees. It wasn't an act this time. My knees actually hurt. I rolled back the corner of the silk rug, revealing the floor safe installed in the foundation. This wasn't the wall safe where I kept the gun. This was the decoy safe I used for household cash and documents. I pulled the obsidian ledger from my cardigan pocket. The black moleskin looked ominous, heavy with secrets. I held it up to the light, flipping through the pages so the codes were visible to anyone peeking through the door crack. "Safe," I muttered to myself, projecting my voice just enough. "Keep it safe. The senator, the accounts." I placed the book into the safe. I locked it. The dial spun with a heavy, mechanical whir. Then the performance. I stood up, panting. I held the key, a heavy, iron skeleton key, in my trembling hand. I looked around the room frantically. "Can't keep it on me," I whispered. "They'll search me. They'll strip me." I limped toward the fireplace. I picked up a porcelain urn on the mantel, a hideous thing from the Victorian era that Chloe hated. "No, too obvious," I said. I moved to the bookshelves. I pulled down a hollowed-out copy of the Holy Bible. It was a prop I'd bought years ago for a gag. "God will protect it," I said. I dropped the key inside the hollow book. Clink. I placed the Bible back on the shelf. Top shelf, third from the left, right next to a bust of Dante. "Safe," I breathed. I smoothed my cardigan, adjusted my glasses, and turned toward the door. I walked out of the library, almost bumping into Julian, who was pressing himself flat against the hallway wall to avoid being seen. "Oh," I cried out, stumbling. "Easy, Artie." Julian caught me. He was breathing hard, his face flushed with adrenaline. "Where are you going?" "Nap," I said, looking exhausted. I need to forget. Too much noise in my head." "Yeah, you go nap," Julian said, steering me toward the stairs. "Take a long nap. You deserve it. You're a good boy," I said, patting his cheek. "Don't let the men in suits in." "I won't," he promised. "I'll handle everything." I went upstairs to my bedroom. I closed the door and locked it. I sat in my chair and pulled out the monitoring tablet. I switched the feed to camera 2. The library view. The door pushed open. Julian slipped inside. He didn't look at the books he was planning to butcher. He didn't look at the rare editions. He went straight for the rug. He pulled it back. He stared at the safe. He reached out and touched the cold steel dial. He tried to turn it. Locked. He stood up and looked at the shelves. His eyes scanned the rows of spines. He knew exactly where the key was. But he hesitated. I watched him pace. He was thinking, if he took it now, I might notice it was gone when I woke up. He needed a window. He needed me out of the house. He pulled out his phone. I switched the audio feed on. "Chloe," he said. "Hey, babe. Yep. Listen, for the engagement party, we need more booze. Like a lot more. And we need to get the old man out of here for a few hours tomorrow morning so the caterers can set up. Yep. Take him to that specialist doctor you were talking about. The hearing guy. Yep. Tomorrow at 10. He hung up and smiled at the safe. "Jackpot," he whispered. I sat back in my chair and steepled my fingers. He had taken the bait. He had swallowed the hook. And now he was arranging his own execution. Tomorrow at 10. That gave me 12 hours to prepare the final nail in his coffin. I opened my laptop and connected to the secure browser. It was time to leak the story. I needed to prime the pump. When the FBI raided this house, I didn't want them coming for a confused old man's tax returns. I wanted them coming for a domestic threat. I began to type the anonymous tip. Subject: urgent. Sale of classified Department of Defense coordinates. Location 42 Oakwood Lane. The key was in the Bible, but the judgment was coming from me. The morning sun was too bright, the air too crisp for the dirty business at hand. Chloe bustled around the hallway, checking her purse for the third time. "Come on, Grandpa," she urged, handing me my cane. "We don't want to be late. Dr. Evans is very busy." "Who?" I asked, blinking rapidly. "Dr. Evans? I thought we were going to the zoo. I wanted to see the monkeys." "No monkeys today, Artie," Julian said, stepping out of the kitchen. He was vibrating with nervous energy, practically bouncing on the balls of his feet. He handed me my coat. "Just a nice ear doctor. Maybe he can fix that hearing aid so you stop hearing voices." "Huh?" He winked at me, a conspiratorial wink, the kind a predator gives prey before the bite. "Be good," Julian told Chloe, kissing her cheek. "I'll stay here and supervise the caterers. Make sure they don't trample the rose bushes." "You're the best," Chloe beamed. She led me out to her Prius. As she buckled me and treating me like a toddler, I glanced back at the house. Julian was standing in the doorway, waving. As soon as the car backed out of the driveway, the wave stopped. He turned on his heel and slammed the door. 10 minutes later, we were on the highway. Chloe turned on the radio, humming along to some auto-tuned pop song. I slumped against the window, feigning sleep. In reality, I was wide awake. I slipped my smartphone out of my coat pocket, shielding the screen with my hand. I opened the secure app. Camera 02. Library Live. The room was empty for exactly 30 seconds after we left. Then the door burst open. Julian didn't walk. He sprinted. He didn't check the windows. He didn't check the hallway. His arrogance was absolute. He went straight to the bookshelf. He didn't need to search. He knew exactly where to look. He reached up, grabbed the hollowed-out Holy Bible, and shook it. Clink. The iron key fell onto the carpet. "Bingo," I heard him whisper through the earbud concealed in my hearing aid. He snatched the key and dropped to his knees beside the rug. He threw the silk eyes aside like a dirty rag. He jammed the key into the floor safe and twisted. Click thunk. The heavy steel door swung upward. Julian reached in. He bypassed the emergency cache. He bypassed the pistol. His hands were shaking as he pulled out the black moleskin notebook. The obsidian ledger. He sat back on his heels, breathing hard, cradling the book like a religious artifact. He opened it to the first page. I watched on the tiny screen, analyzing his micro-expressions. First, confusion, then recognition, then pure, unadulterated greed. Holy, he breathed. He ran his finger down the list of nonsense I had written the night before. He interpreted the toaster serial number as an account ID. He interpreted the randomized coordinates as vault locations. He saw what he wanted to see. Untold wealth, hidden by a senile old man who had forgotten he owned the world. It's real, he muttered, a manic grin splitting his face. The old bat wasn't lying. It's actually real. He pulled out his own phone. He didn't call the police. He didn't call Chloe. He dialed Marcus. Pick up, you useless. Julian hissed. Hello. Marcus's voice crackled through the feed. Marcus, I got it. I actually got it. Julian practically screamed, his voice echoing in the quiet library. The ledger is in my hands. It's not just books, man. It looks like offshore accounts. Cayman, Swiss, maybe crypto keys. It's huge. Send me a pic, Marcus said. I need to verify the format before we list it. Listing it? Julian laughed. Screw listing it on the open market. This is blackmail material, Marcus. See these initials? SH? That's probably Senator Harris. JB? That's Judge Bennett. This old man was dirty. I can squeeze these people for millions. I almost smiled in the passenger seat of the Prius. Senator Harris. Judge Bennett. S.H. stood for Sherlock Holmes. JB stood for James Bond. I had used initials from my fiction collection. Julian was blackmailing fictional characters. Just send the data, Marcus urged. I have a buyer on the Red Channel who pays for raw data dumps. If it's legit, he'll wire the advance by tonight. Tonight? Julian looked at his watch. Perfect. The engagement party starts at 6. I'll do the transfer then. It'll be the best engagement present I ever gave myself. What about the old man? Marcus asked. Julian looked up, staring directly at the hidden camera in the Shakespeare bust, though he didn't know it. His eyes were cold. He's done, Julian said. Once I cash this out, I'm putting him in a home, the cheapest one I can find, one of those places that smells like bleach and despair. I'm done wiping his drool. He snapped a photo of the page with his phone. Then another. Then another. I'm gonna be rich, Marcus. And Arthur Sterling is gonna die alone. He slammed the ledger shut and shoved it into his jacket pocket. I closed the app on my phone and slipped it back into my pocket. Grandpa, Chloe asked, glancing over. You okay? You're smiling. Am I? I asked, my voice soft. I suppose I am, dear. I have a feeling tonight is going to be a night to remember. It's just a party, Grandpa. She laughed. Oh no, I thought. It's not a party. It's a funeral. Julian had the book. He had the motive. And now, thanks to that phone call, I had the confession. It was time to call the journalist. Dr. Evans was a kind man with cold hands and a condescending smile. He spent 45 minutes poking at my ears, nodding sympathetically while I shouted, "What?" at random intervals. His hearing is stable, Miss Sterling, Evans told Chloe, but the cognitive decline that can make processing difficult. He hears the sound, but he doesn't understand the meaning. I understand, Chloe sighed, squeezing my hand. It's just hard. I want a donut, I announced loudly, staring at a poster of a human ear. The one with the sprinkles. Chloe laughed, a sound of relief. Okay, Grandpa, we can get a donut. We stopped at a cafe 3 blocks down. It was a hipster trap, exposed brick, Edison bulbs, and Wi-Fi that required a Facebook login. Perfect for the digitally oblivious, dangerous for anyone else. But I wasn't anyone else. You sit here, Chloe said, parking me at a corner table. I'll go get your sprinkled donut and my latte. It's a long line. And a napkin, I shouted. I make a mess. I know, Grandpa. She turned her back. The line was 6 people deep. I had approximately 4 minutes. I didn't use the cafe Wi-Fi. That was for amateurs. I reached into my inner coat pocket and pulled out the burner phone, a prepaid Android I'd bought with cash 6 months ago. I activated the mobile hotspot, but didn't connect to the internet directly. Instead, I routed the connection through 3 proxy servers. One in Estonia, one in Panama, and one in a server farm in New Jersey that I knew had been seized by the feds in '08 but never fully shut down. That I opened a secure messaging app first, the journalist. Gavin Richards. He was a vulture for the City Ledger. He didn't care about truth. He cared about clicks, scandals, and destroying the upper crust. I had fed him stories in the '90s that ruined 3 mayors. He didn't know it was me then, and he wouldn't know now. To. Subject. Exclusive. The Vance espionage ring. Message. Julian Vance, influencer/crypto fraud, is selling stolen encrypted government data tonight at 6:30 p.m. Location. 42 Oakwood Lane. The FBI has been tipped off. If you want the photo of the year, the arrest of a traitor in a tuxedo, be there. The data is hidden in a black book marked with senatorial initials. Send. Next, the buyer. I needed to ensure Julian felt the pressure to sell tonight. I switched accounts to the persona of Red Vector, the dark web buyer Julian thought he was dealing with via Marcus. I sent a direct message to Marcus's encrypted handle. To. Message. Funds ready. $500,000 in Monero. Transfer must happen at 1900 hours sharp. My courier is in the area. Do not make me wait. If the data is verified, I buy. If it's fake, you disappear. Send. Finally, the law. This was the delicate part. I couldn't lie to the FBI, that's a felony. But I could mislead them with technically true statements that led to a catastrophic conclusion. I navigated to the FBI's public tips portal. I didn't use a login. Tip type. Counterintelligence/domestic threat. Subject. Sale of encrypted data / the Obsidian Ledger. Location. 42 Oakwood Lane, Tam City. Suspect. Julian Vance. Details. Suspect is in possession of a stolen ledger containing encrypted coordinates and coded references to SH and JB, believed to be high-level government officials. Suspect has been overheard negotiating the sale of this data to a foreign entity known as Red Vector for cryptocurrency. Transaction scheduled for tonight, 1900 hours. Suspect is armed and unstable. It wasn't a lie. He did have a ledger. It did have encrypted coordinates to dumpsters. It did reference SH, Sherlock Holmes. He was negotiating a sale, and there was a gun in the safe he had just looted. I hit submit. A little green checkmark appeared. Thank you for helping keep America safe. You're welcome. I whispered that I wiped the phone, powered it down, and removed the battery. By the time Chloe returned with a pink frosted donut, the phone was back in my pocket and I was staring blankly at a ficus plant. Here you go, Grandpa, she smiled, placing the donut on a napkin. Your favorite. Is it Tuesday? I asked, grabbing the donut with a shaking hand. No, Grandpa, she said gently. It's Saturday. The party is tonight. Remember, I took a bite, letting the sugar dissolve on my tongue. Party. Yes, fireworks. Sort of, she laughed. A bonfire. I chewed slowly. Oh yes, there would be fireworks. We drove home. The house was already buzzing. Caterers were setting up a tent in the backyard. A bartender was polishing glasses. And there, in the center of the lawn, was the fire pit. Julian had been busy. Beside the pit sat a stack of books. My books. I saw the spine of a leather-bound history of the English-speaking peoples. It was gutted. Just the cover remained, ready to be burned for aesthetic. Julian came out of the house, holding a glass of champagne. He looked triumphant. He spotted me and strode over. Hey, Artie. Good appointment. He didn't wait for an answer. He leaned in close, lowering his voice. Hey, you go upstairs and rest. Okay? Stay in your room. I don't want you wandering around confusing the guests. I'll bring you a plate of mash later. The books. I pointed at the stack. Decoration. Artie. He smirked. Just decoration. Go on. Shoo. I looked at him one last time. He was wearing a velvet tuxedo jacket. He looked like the king of the world. Okay, I said obediently. I'll go to my room. I walked past him. As I passed the fire pit, I saw the empty shell of Great Expectations. Protocol Zero is live. I thought that I went upstairs, locked my bedroom door, and turned on the monitors. The guests were arriving. The journalist was likely fueling his van. The FBI was assessing the threat level. And Julian Vance was about to try and sell a list of fast food dumpsters to the United States government. The bass from the DJ booth vibrated through the floorboards of my bedroom. A relentless, thumping heartbeat that mocked the quiet dignity this house used to possess. It was 6:15 p.m. The engagement party was in full swing. I sat in my wingback chair, the room dark save for the glow of my tablet. I had 3 windows open. Window 1, the feed from the library camera. Window 2, the feed from the backyard security camera. Window 3, a secure chat terminal routed through Tor, logged in as Red Vector. Downstairs, the elite of Julian's world had gathered. Influencers with ring lights clipped to their phones, crypto bros in rented suits, and girls who looked bored and terrified simultaneously. They drank my vintage wine out of plastic cups and took selfies in front of the art they didn't understand. On the backyard feed, I saw Julian. He was holding court near the fire pit. The flames were already licking high, hungry and bright. That he held a book in his hand. I zoomed in. It was the empty binding of a 1920s edition of The Great Gatsby. To the future, Julian shouted, raising his glass. We burn the past to build the new empire. The crowd cheered. A mindless, braying sound. Julian tossed the binding into the fire. That I watched the leather curl. I watched the gold leaf blacken and peel. It didn't burn instantly. It suffered. It writhed in the heat. My hand gripped the armrest so hard the leather creaked. Burn it, Julian. Go ahead. That's grand larceny and destruction of property added to the charge sheet. But I needed him inside. I needed him at the computer. I turned to the chat terminal. It was time to pull the string. Red Vector. Asset verification required immediately. Buyer is becoming impatient. I waited on the backyard feed. Julian's phone buzzed in his pocket. He pulled it out, squinting at the screen. He tapped out a reply. Marcus X, relay seller, is at the event. Asking for 30 minutes. Red Vector. Negative. Window closes in 15 minutes. Secure link established. I need a scan of page 7 and the SH cipher key. If not received by 1845, the deal is void and I burn the connection. I watched Julian read the message. His smile faltered, the arrogance drained out of his posture. He looked around nervously, then down the rest of his champagne. He said something to Chloe, probably a lie about a work emergency, and pushed through the crowd toward the house. Good boy. I whispered. I switched my attention to the library camera. A moment later, the door flew open. Julian stumbled in, locking it behind him. The thumping bass was muffled here, but still present, a dull throb in the air. He sat at my desk and flipped open his laptop. He looked sweaty. The adrenaline was curdling into anxiety. He pulled the obsidian ledger from his inner jacket pocket and slapped it onto the desk. That he started typing. Come on, he muttered, his voice tinny through the bug. Don't bail on me now, you shadowy prick. I typed back on my tablet. Red Vector, I see you are online. Upload the sample. Julian fumbled with his phone, snapping a picture of page 7, a page filled with gibberish coordinates that I had modeled after a 1970s KGB cipher I once saw in a museum. He transferred it to the laptop and hit send. I received the file. I didn't even look at it. I waited 60 seconds, an agonizing eternity in the digital world, just to make him sweat. On the screen, Julian was chewing his thumbnail. He checked his watch. He tapped his foot. Red Vector. Sample verified. The structure matches the Obsidian protocol. Payment of 500,000 US dollars in Monero is queued. Julian threw his head back and let out a silent scream of victory. He punched the air. Red vector. Final transfer initiated at 1900 hours. Keep the channel open. Do not disconnect. Do not leave the terminal. If the connection drops, the funds revert. I'm not going anywhere, Julian said to the screen, grinning like a skull. I'm glued to this chair, baby. Perfect. He was locked in. He was in possession of the stolen goods. He was actively negotiating the sale on a digital channel I could prove he was using. Now, the final piece of the stage management. I picked up the burner phone again. I checked the local police scanner app dispatch to all units. We have a code 3 request from federal agency. Suspect location is 42 Oakwood Lane. EST is 5 minutes out. Perimeter requested 0.5 minutes. I stood up and walked to the mirror. I adjusted my cardigan. I messed up my hair to look bedraggled. I practiced my bewildered face. I needed to be downstairs when they arrived. I needed to be the confused old man cowering in the corner while the dangerous criminal was taken down. I unlocked my bedroom door and stepped out onto the landing. The party was loud. The smell of wood book smoke drifted up the stairs. It stung my nose. I gripped the banister. Showtime. I thought that I started my slow, shuffling descent into the chaos. The stairs felt miles long. Every step was a performance. I gripped the banister with a white-knuckled intensity that looked like frailty but was actually restraint. If I didn't hold on, I might have marched down there and strangled the DJ myself. The living room, my living room, where I had once hosted peace talks between rival union leaders, was a war zone of bad taste. A fog machine was pumping artificial smoke into the air, obscuring the oil paintings. The bass was a physical assault. I could feel the vibrations rattling the porcelain figurines in the corner cabinet. I reached the bottom landing. A young man in a shirt unbuttoned to his navel almost knocked me over. He didn't apologize. He didn't even see me. I was just an obstacle. A piece of driftwood in the river of beautiful people. Grandpa, Chloe appeared out of the fog, holding a tray of shrimp. She looked frantic. Her smile was tight, her eyes darting around the room, checking for disasters. What are you doing down here? It's too loud for you. I wanted water. I croaked, cupping my ear. The music? Is it the television? No, Grandpa. It's the DJ, she shouted over the thumping beat. Look, go to the kitchen. Get some water. Then please go back upstairs. Julian he's in a meeting. He can't be disturbed. Meeting, I repeated. Okay, meeting. I shuffled toward the kitchen, but as soon as she turned away to greet a D-list reality star, I veered left toward the French doors that opened onto the back patio. The cool night air hit me. The backyard was transformed. Strings of Edison bulbs crisscrossed the lawn. A bar was set up on the flagstones, and in the center, the fire pit roared. I walked toward it, drawn like a moth. The heat was intense. The smell was unmistakable, the sharp, chemical tang of burning glue and the sweet, dry scent of old paper. I stood at the edge of the pit. The guests were laughing, tossing empty plastic cups into the flames. Burn, baby, burn. A girl in a sequin dress squealed. I looked into the heart of the fire. Resting on a log, half consumed, was the leather cover of A Tale of Two Cities. The gold lettering on the spine flashed in the firelight one last time before curling into ash. It was the best of times, it was the worst of times. Julian hadn't just burned the empty covers. He hadn't bothered to separate them all. I saw charred pages, words, thoughts, history. A cold, hard knot tightened in my chest. This was why I did what I did. Men like Julian didn't build. They consumed. They took things of value, companies, reputations, art, and burned them for a moment of warmth. I checked my watch. 18:58. I looked past the hedges, toward the street. Through the gap in the ivy, I saw it. A white van. No markings, but a satellite dish on the roof. Gavin Richards, the journalist. He was parked 3 houses down, camera lens likely trained on the front door, waiting for the tip to pay off. I had promised him a spectacle, and Gavin never missed a spectacle. Suddenly, the music cut out. The silence was violent. It slammed into the party, leaving only the murmur of confused guests and the crackle of the book fire. "Hey, what gives?" someone shouted at the DJ booth. Then the lights came, red and blue, strobing, violent. They washed over the white party tent, turning the guests into flickering ghosts. The sound of heavy tires on gravel. Not one car, three. "FBI, open the gate." The amplified voice boomed from the driveway, loud enough to wake the dead. The crowd gasped. The girl in the sequined dress dropped her drink. "Remain where you are," the voice commanded. "This is a federal raid." I stood by the fire, letting the heat warm my face. I didn't run. I didn't hide. I adjusted my cardigan, leaned heavily on my cane, and put on my most terrified expression. But inside, I was pouring myself a scotch and lighting a cigar. The front door crashed open with a sound like a gunshot. Julian was still in the library, locked in his transaction, thinking he was seconds away from a payday. You wouldn't hear the door. You wouldn't hear the screams of the party. Guests thought he was wearing noise-canceling headphones. I had seen them on the feed. He was about to be the most surprised man on earth. Federal agents move like a swarm of angry wasps. Fast, aggressive, and utterly lacking in humor. I watched them swarm through the front door, tactical lights sweeping the foyer, boots thudding against the marble floors in a terrifying rhythm. "Hands! Let me see your hands!" A dozen party guests dropped their drinks and raised their arms. Chloe was shrieking near the kitchen, pressed against the refrigerator, her face a mask of confusion and terror. "Grandpa!" she screamed when she saw me standing by the patio doors. "Get down!" I didn't get down. I let my cane clatter to the floor. I grabbed the nearest agent's sleeve, a risk, but I knew how to play the frail civilian. "Please," I wailed, my voice cracking. "Don't hurt him. He didn't mean to sell the secrets. He's just a boy." The agent, a hulking figure in body armor with FBI emblazoned in yellow across his chest, paused. He looked down at me, seeing a terrified septuagenarian in a cardigan. "Sir, step back," the agent commanded, but his voice wasn't hostile. It was protective. "Where is the suspect? Where is Julian Vance?" I pointed a shaking finger toward the closed double doors of the library. "In there," I sobbed. "He locked himself in," he said. "He said he was talking to the Russians. He said he had the senator's ledger. Please, don't shoot him." The agent's eyes widened. "The Russians?" He tapped his radio. "Target is isolated in the library. Possible foreign contact in progress. Breach and clear. Go, go." Four agents broke off from the main group. They moved toward the library door with fluid, practiced precision. They stacked up against the wall. One of them held a battering ram, the key to the city. I shuffled backward, pressing myself into the shadows of the hallway. I needed a front row seat. Inside the library, the world was different. I knew what was happening because I still had the feed open on the phone hidden in my pocket, though I couldn't look at it now. Julian was sitting in my chair. On his screen, the Monero transfer bar was likely hovering at 99%. He was probably rehearsing his victory speech. He had the headphones on, blasting some awful techno track to drown out the world. He was in his own universe. 3, 2, 1, crash. The sound was deafening. The heavy oak doors, which had stood for 60 years, splintered around the lock. They flew open, banging violently against the inner walls. Federal agents, "Get on the ground." FBI, "Show me your hands." Drop it now." The shouting was a physical force, filled the room. Julian spun around in the chair. He didn't understand. His brain couldn't bridge the gap between, "I am about to be a millionaire," and "a SWAT team is in my living room." He ripped the headphones off. He stared at the 4 MP5 submachine guns pointed at his chest. The laser sights danced on his velvet tuxedo jacket, one on his heart, one on his gut, two on his forehead. "Whoa!" Julian screamed. throwing his hands up. The laptop teetered on the edge of the desk. "Don't shoot. Don't shoot. It's just a prank. It's a prank." On the ground. "Now." The lead agent rushed forward. He didn't wait for compliance. He grabbed Julian by the collar of his expensive jacket and hauled him out of the chair. He slammed him face first onto the Persian rug, the same rug Julian had casually tossed aside earlier that day. "I didn't do it," Julian shrieked, his face pressed into the wool. "It's not my book. It's the old man's. It's Arthur's. He's the spy. He's the one with the codes." The agent kneeled on Julian's back, cuffing his hands roughly. "You have the right to remain silent." "Check the laptop," Julian yelled, hysterical now. "I was just checking it. I was verifying the data for a friend. It's the senator's files. Look at the initials. Sage, JB. It's government property." I closed my eyes and exhaled slowly. It's government files. He had just confessed to possessing what he believed to be classified documents. He had admitted to knowing the content. He had tried to sell it. The lead agent looked at the laptop screen. It was still open. The chat window with red vector was visible. Red vector transferring funds. Awaiting final key. Julian V. User, here it is. Don't screw me. The agent tapped his radio. "Dispatch, we have the device. Active connection to a hostile endpoint confirmed. Suspect is in custody. Secure the perimeter." They hauled Julian to his feet. He was crying now. Snot ran down his nose. His hair was a mess. He looked at the shattered door, and then he saw me standing in the hallway, clutching my chest, looking horrified. "Artie," Julian screamed. Tell them it's your book. Tell them you're the spy." I looked at the agent nearest to me. I let my lip tremble. He told me he was writing a novel." I whispered. "I don't know what he's talking about. I just wanted my library back." The agent glared at Julian. "Move him out. Now." They dragged him toward the front door. The party guests parted like the Red Sea, phones out, recording every second. Flashbulbs popped from outside. Gavin Richards had gotten his shot. Julian Vance, the crypto king, the influencer, the destroyer of books, was being frog-marched out of his own engagement party in handcuffs, sobbing about a Senator Sherlock Holmes. I watched him go. Then, I looked at the agent securing the laptop. "Excuse me," I said softly. Is it over? Can I sit down?" "Yes, sir," the agent said gently. "We need to clear the room for evidence collection, but we'll get you a chair in the kitchen. You're safe now." "Thank you," I said. "You boys are very efficient." I turned away to hide the smile that was fighting its way onto my face. Phase 1 was complete. He was arrested. But a fixer doesn't just stop at the arrest. I had to ensure that when the truth came out that the book was fake, it wouldn't matter. I had to ensure his reputation was dead before the handcuffs came off. The media cycle was about to begin, and I was the editor-in-chief. The blue lights stopped strobing, but the red ones kept spinning, casting a bloody, rhythmic pulse over the driveway. The party guests had been corralled, questioned, and released, fleeing into the night like cockroaches when the kitchen light snaps on. I sat at the kitchen table, a wool blanket draped over my shoulders by a well-meaning paramedic. I held a cup of lukewarm water with 2 hands, trembling just enough to keep the frail survivor narrative alive. Chloe sat across from me. She wasn't crying anymore. She was in shock. Her mascara ran in dark streaks down her cheeks, and she stared at the granite countertop as if it held the answers to the universe. He said he was an investor," she whispered, her voice hollow. "He said he was into crypto." "I know, dear," I soothed, reaching out to pat her hand. "He fooled us all. He was very charismatic." The FBI agent asked me if I knew about the dead drop coordinates, she said, looking up at me with wide, terrified eyes. "Grandpa," he asked if I knew red vector. "I don't even know what that is." "Shoo," I said. "It's over. They know you're innocent. You're a victim, just like me." I took a sip of water to hide the smirk threatening to break through. "Red vector. A handle I had come up with while eating a ham sandwich 3 days ago was now a priority subject in a federal investigation. In the hallway, the FBI forensics team was busy. I watched a technician in blue latex gloves carry a clear evidence bag past the door. Inside was the black moleskin notebook, the obsidian ledger. He held it like it was radioactive. If they opened it right now and really looked, they'd see that the encrypted strings on page 4 were just the ingredients of my late wife's beef stew recipe written in hexadecimal. But they wouldn't look closely, not yet. They were in secure and transport mode. They would drive it to a SCIF, sensitive compartmented information facility, scan it, and run it through a supercomputer. By the time the supercomputer spat out carrots and onions, the news cycle would have already executed Julian Vance. I shifted in my chair and discreetly checked the burner phone hidden in my cardigan pocket. I tapped the screen once to wake it. The notification tray was full. City Ledger breaking news. FBI raids mansion of influencer Julian Vance. Linked to sale of classified intelligence. Twitter. Trending. Hashtag Trader Vance. Hashtag Spy Influencer. Hashtag Sherlock Codes. The internet was already dissecting Julian screaming about Sherlock Holmes during the arrest. I opened the article by Gavin Richards. It was a masterpiece of sensationalism. Sources close to the investigation confirmed that Julian Vance, a self-proclaimed crypto guru, was apprehended in the act of selling encrypted government coordinates to a foreign buyer known as Red Vector. The data, hidden in a sophisticated physical ledger, allegedly contains blackmail material on high-ranking U.S. officials labeled SH and JB. I almost laughed. Sophisticated physical ledger. It was a $5 notebook from Staples. Grandpa, Chloe asked, "What are you looking at?" Quickly locked the phone. "Just checking the time." "I'm tired, Chloe." "I'm sorry," she said, finally breaking down again. "This is all my fault. I brought him here. I let him treat you like garbage. And look at the house. The party?" She gestured vaguely toward the backyard. "The backyard," I repeated softly. "Chloe, did you see what he was burning?" She frowned. "He said it was wood. For the aesthetic." I stood up, gripping my cane. "Come with me, dear." "Grandpa, we shouldn't come." I led her to the French doors. The FBI had cordoned off the fire pit with yellow tape, but the agents were busy inside the house seizing hard drives. The fire had died down to glowing embers. We walked out onto the patio. The air still smelled of smoke and glue. I pointed with my cane at the edge of the ash pile. The fire hadn't consumed everything. The spine of a book lay there, charred but legible. The picture of Dorian Gray, first edition, 1891. Chloe gasped. She took a step closer. She saw the other fragments, the leather corners, the marbled end papers curling in the heat. "Oh my God," she whispered. She put a hand to her mouth. Are those your books?" "He was gutting them," I said, my voice dropping the old man quaver for just a second, letting the steel show through. "He was cutting out the pictures to sell and burning the words. He told me old things should burn to make room for him." Chloe fell to her knees on the flagstones. She picked up a charred piece of paper. It crumbled in her hand. The horror on her face wasn't about the espionage charges anymore. It wasn't about the FBI. It was personal. She realized she had been sleeping next to a vandal, a cultural barbarian. "He destroyed them," she sobbed. "Mom's books, Grandma's books." "Yes," I said. "He did." I looked at the house. The lights were blazing. The agents were carrying out boxes. Julian was currently in a holding cell, likely being interrogated by a counterintelligence officer who was asking very serious questions about Senator Holmes. Julian would be confused, terrified, and blabbering. But the real damage was happening right here on the patio. Chloe's love for him hadn't just died. It had been incinerated. A tall man in a suit walked out onto the patio. He wasn't wearing tactical gear. He looked tired. It was the lead agent. "Mr. Sterling?" he asked. I turned, putting the mask back on. "Yes, officer?" "Agent Miller," he corrected. "We've finished our initial sweep. We're taking the electronic devices and the ledger into evidence. You and your granddaughter are free to stay, but the library is a sealed crime scene until further notice. Of course, I said. Whatever you need to catch the spies. He looked at me curiously. Mr. Sterling, the suspect Mr. Vance, he keeps insisting the ledger is yours, that the codes are yours. Chloe stood up, her face streaked with soot and tears. She stepped in front of me, eyes blazing. Julian is a liar, she spat. He's a liar, a thief, and a monster. He burned my grandmother's library for a party. Don't listen to a word he says. Agent Miller looked at the charred books, then at Chloe, then at me. He nodded slowly. We know how desperate men talk when they're cornered, ma'am. We'll get to the truth. Thank you, I said as he walked away. I put my arm around Chloe. Let's go inside, dear. It's getting cold. The truth? The truth was a flexible concept. And right now, I had bent it into a knot that Julian Vance would never untie. The news cycle in the 21st century is a voracious beast. It doesn't digest, it regurgitates. And for the next 48 hours, it gorged itself on Julian Vance. I sat in the kitchen, watching the small TV Chloe had set up on the counter. The volume was low, but the headlines screamed. CNN. Influencer held without bail in espionage probe. Fox. Who is Red Vector? The mystery buyer behind the Vance leaks. TMZ. Julian Vance's ex-girlfriends speak out. He was always obsessed with codes. I buttered my toast. The obsessed with codes angle was a nice touch. The internet sleuths had dug up old tweets where Julian talked about cracking the system, referring to Bitcoin, and recontextualized them as proof of his long-term plan to sell state secrets. Perception is reality, and Julian's reality was now that of a master criminal, which was ironically the most credit anyone had ever given him. Chloe walked in. She looked like she hadn't slept. She was wearing one of my old flannels. The lawyer called, she said, pouring coffee with a steady hand. Julian's public defender. Oh, I asked, looking up over my reading glasses. What did he say? He says Julian is hysterical. He's claiming the ledger is a decoy and that the codes are recipes. She frowned, confused. He says if the FBI actually decodes it, they'll see it's nonsense. I took a bite of toast. Crunch. Well, I said thoughtfully, that sounds like a clever defense strategy. Pretend it was all a joke? It's just a prank defense. That's what the lawyer thinks, Chloe said. But the FBI isn't laughing. They found the chat logs on his laptop, the ones where he's negotiating the sale for $500,000. They say intent is enough for a conviction on fraud and attempted espionage, even if the goods were fake. He was trying to sell secrets, attempted espionage, wire fraud, grand larceny, the books. The beauty of the trap was the chat log. I had pinned him to the intent. It didn't matter if he was selling a grocery list. He thought he was selling treason, and he accepted money for it. That made him a danger to the state. And, Chloe added, her voice hardening, I told the lawyer about the books. I sent him photos of the fire pit. I told him I'm pressing charges for destruction of property and theft. I don't care if he goes to prison for the spy stuff or not. I want him to pay for every single page he burned. Good girl, I said softly. I'm going to the station, she said, grabbing her keys. They need a formal statement about his behavior, about how he tried to manipulate you. Be brave, I said. She kissed my forehead. I will. For Grandma. She left. I waited until the car pulled away. Then, I stood up and walked to the library. The yellow crime scene tape was still across the door, but the agents had cleared out the bulk of the evidence. I ducked under the tape. The room was a mess. The rug was gone. The desk was dusted with fingerprint powder. The safe was open and empty. I walked to the fireplace. The baby monitor inside the Shakespeare bust was still there. The feds had missed it. Amateurs. I plucked it out and dropped it into my pocket. I needed to make one final move. The fixer in me wasn't satisfied with prison time. Prison time ends. I wanted erasure. I went to my bedroom and booted up the secure laptop. I logged into the Red Vector, account one last time that I had received a message. Not from Julian, obviously, from the FBI Cyber Division, who had seized Julian's laptop and were now monitoring the channel, waiting for Red Vector to slip up. Julian V. FBI control transfer incomplete. We need to verify the hash. Resend coordinates. They were phishing, trying to trace me. I smiled. I typed my final reply. Red Vector, asset compromised. The Vance node is burned. Terminating link. You will never find the others. I hit send. Then, I executed a script I had written days ago. The chat terminal dissolved into static. The history was overwritten with random noise. The IP address bounced through a chain of servers in North Korea and Iran before vanishing into the digital ether. By sending that message, I had confirmed to the FBI that Julian was part of a larger network. The Vance node, that implied he wasn't acting alone. That implied a hierarchy. They would never stop investigating him. They would tear his life apart looking for the others. He would be on a no-fly list until the day he died. He would be watched. He would be audited. He would be radioactive. I closed the laptop. I removed the hard drive. I went downstairs to the garage. I took a hammer to the hard drive, smashing it until the platters were nothing but glittering dust. I swept the dust into a Ziploc bag and tossed it into the trash can. Right on top of Julian's protein powder. I walked back into the kitchen, sat down, and turned up the volume on the TV. The anchorwoman was speaking gravely. Breaking news. Sources indicate the Vance espionage ring may have ties to international syndicates. The FBI has raised the threat level. I took another sip of coffee. Arthur, I whispered to myself, you've still got it. The silence in the house was heavy, but it wasn't the oppressive silence of a tomb anymore. It was the clean, sterilized silence of a hospital room after the patient has been discharged. 3 days had passed since the raid that I was in the library, or what was left of it. Chloe and I had spent the morning cleaning. We had swept up the fingerprint powder. We had picked up the scattered books. The empty space on the shelves where the butchered volumes used to be looked like missing teeth. A gap that would take years to fill. But the air was clear. The smell of Julian's cologne was gone, replaced by the scent of lemon polish and old paper. The doorbell rang. Not the frantic buzzing of a reporter. The police had cleared them from the driveway yesterday, but a solid, authoritative press. That I adjusted my cardigan and limped to the door. It was Agent Miller. He looked like he hadn't slept in 72 hours. His tie was loosened, and he was holding a plastic evidence bag. Inside was the black moleskin notebook. Agent Miller, I said, my voice wavering slightly. Is everything? Did you find the spies? Can I come in, Mr. Sterling? He asked. His tone was different today, less urgent, more weary. Of course, please. We sat in the kitchen. Chloe was upstairs, packing Julian's clothes into black garbage bags to donate to Goodwill. She refused to look at his things anymore. Miller placed the bag on the table. He stared at it for a long moment. We ran the ledger through the cryptanalysis unit at Quantico, Miller said. He looked at me, searching my face for something. Do you know what we found? I shook my head, eyes wide behind my glasses. Nuclear codes? The senator's secrets. Miller sighed, rubbing his temples. No, Mr. Sterling. We found gibberish and recipes. Recipes. I blinked. Page 7, Miller said, pointing to the book through the plastic. The page Mr. Vance photographed and sent to the buyer. The SH cipher. It decodes to a list of ingredients for a beef Wellington, written in a basic substitution cipher. And the coordinates? They point to dumpsters behind various Wendy's locations in New Jersey. I let my mouth hang open. I stared at the book. Then, I let a look of slow, dawning realization wash over my face. Beef Wellington, I whispered. Eleanor loved beef Wellington. I looked up at Miller, tears forming in my eyes. That looks like Eleanor's handwriting. She used to write in code. For fun. She and her sister, they had a secret language. It was a lie, of course. Eleanor hated puzzles. But dead wives make excellent alibis. Miller's expression softened. This was your wife's book? I think so. I sniffled. Julian, he must have found it in the attic. He was always snooping. He must have thought. I started to chuckle, a dry, wheezing sound. He thought Eleanor's cookbook was a spy ledger. Miller didn't laugh. He looked disgusted. He did. And because he thought it was real, and because he solicited money from a foreign entity, this red vector, he committed wire fraud and attempted espionage. The intent to sell classified information is a crime, Mr. Sterling, even if the information turns out to be a recipe for puff pastry. So, he's going to jail? I asked. He's looking at 20 years, Miller said grimly, plus the grand larceny charges your granddaughter filed for the rare books. And since Red Vector burned the connection and implied a larger network, the Patriot Act provisions apply. Mr. Vance is going to be in a federal holding facility for a very long time while we hunt for a ghost network that probably realized he was an idiot and cut him loose. A ghost network, I repeated, tasting the words. Miller stood up. We're keeping the book as evidence of his delusion. I just wanted to clarify the contents. We were worried about a national security breach. Turns out, it's just a case of extreme stupidity and greed. He was always very greedy, I said softly. Miller walked to the door. He paused with his hand on the knob. You know, Mr. Sterling, he said, looking back at me, it's strange. The tip we got, it was very specific. It knew exactly when the transfer would happen. It knew about the SH initials. My heart rate didn't jump. I had spent 40 years controlling my autonomic nervous system. Maybe Julian told someone, I suggested. He was always bragging on his, what do you call it, podcast? Miller nodded slowly. Yeah, maybe. The guy couldn't keep his mouth shut. He opened the door. Take care, Mr. Sterling. You're safe now. Thank you, Agent. I watched him walk down the path to his unmarked sedan. He bought it. He had to buy it. The alternative that the senile old man in the cardigan was a master manipulator who orchestrated a federal sting operation was simply too absurd to consider. I closed the door and locked it. I walked back to the kitchen and picked up the local newspaper Chloe had left on the table. The City Ledger. Front page. The spy who baked me. Influencer caught selling recipes as state secrets. The headline was even better than I had hoped. Gavin Richards had outdone himself. The article detailed the humiliation. It quoted an FBI source calling Vance intellectually compromised. It mentioned the beef Wellington. It painted Julian not as a dangerous mastermind, but as a laughingstock, a buffoon who tried to sell a grocery list to the Russians. This was the true death. If he had gone to prison as a super spy, he would have had status. He would have had street cred. The Aryan Brotherhood or the Latin Kings might have respected a man who stole state secrets. But a man who went to federal prison for stealing a cookbook, a man who got caught because he was too stupid to check the data, he would be the bottom of the food chain. He would be the punchline of every joke in the cell block. I heard footsteps on the stairs. Chloe came down carrying a black garbage bag. She looked lighter. The weight was lifting. That's the last of it, she said, dropping the bag by the door. Every hoodie, every sneaker, every ring light, gone. Good, I said. She walked over and hugged me. She buried her face in my shoulder. I'm so sorry, Grandpa, she whispered. I almost lost you. I almost lost the house. I was so blind. Love makes us blind, Chloe, I said, stroking her hair. But you can see now. Yeah. She pulled back, wiping her eyes. I can see clearly now. She looked at the newspaper on the table. She read the headline. A small, bitter smile touched her lips. Beef Wellington? She asked. Apparently, I smiled. Your grandmother always did make a killer Wellington. We stood there in the quiet kitchen, the house finally ours again. The monster wasn't under the bed anymore. The monster was in a 6x8 cell, wearing an orange jumpsuit, explaining to a terrifying cellmate named Bone Crusher why he was famous for stealing a pastry recipe. I had one last thing to do. The finale. Chloe, I said, why don't we go out for dinner? Celebrate? I'd love that, she said. But first, I said, glancing toward the basement door, I need to check the fuse box. I think the excitement blew a circuit. I can do it, she offered. No, I insisted. I need the exercise. You go get changed. I waited until she went upstairs. Then I opened the basement door and descended into the dark. That I wasn't going to the fuse box. I was going to the furnace. I had the burner phone in my pocket, the one linked to Red Vector, and the anonymous tip. I opened the heavy iron door of the furnace. The pilot light flickered blue. I tossed the phone in. I watched the plastic bubble and melt. I watched the screen turn black. I watched the battery hiss and pop. The evidence was gone. The narrative was set. The fixer had closed the file. The Federal Detention Center looked less like a prison and more like a brutalist monument to despair. It was all gray concrete and fluorescent lights that hummed with a headache-inducing frequency. I sat in the visiting booth, clutching my cane with both hands. I had insisted on coming. I need closure, I told Chloe. I need to look him in the eye and ask him why. Chloe had tried to stop me, but Agent Miller had arranged it. He thought it might help the prosecution if the suspect confessed or apologized to the victim on tape. I adjusted the hearing aid in my left ear, the one that was actually just a piece of plastic. I checked my reflection in the reinforced glass. I looked small, withered. A gust of wind could knock me over. The heavy steel door on the other side of the glass buzzed. Julian Vance shuffled in. He was wearing an orange jumpsuit that was 3 sizes too big. The sleeves were rolled up, revealing pale, trembling wrists. His hair, usually gelled into a helmet of perfection, was greasy and flat. He hadn't shaved in 4 days. Patchy stubble covered his jaw. He looked at me, and his eyes filled with a desperate, frantic hope. He sat down and snatched the phone from the cradle. I picked up my receiver slowly, my hands shaking. "Artie," Julian hissed, pressing his face to the glass. "Artie, thank God. You have to help me. You have to tell them." "Tell them what, Julian?" I asked, my voice thin and quavering. "Tell them about the book." He looked around nervously at the guards standing by the door, then lowered his voice. "The ledger. You put it in the safe. You told me it was billions. You have to tell them it's real, so they stop treating me like a crazy person." "But it wasn't real, Julian," I said, looking confused. "Agent Miller said it was recipes." Julian slammed his fist against the metal shelf. "It's not recipes. That's the cover. It's code. I know you, Artie. You're a spy. You're the spy master or something. Tell them I'm an asset. Get me immunity." I stared at him for a long moment. I let the silence stretch until he started to hyperventilate. Then, I leaned forward. I stopped shaking. I looked directly into his pupils. I let the mask of the senile old man dissolve, muscle by muscle, until only Arthur Sterling remained. "The predator, the fixer, Julian," I said. My voice was no longer thin. It was a baritone, smooth and cold as a glacier. "Stop talking." Julian blinked. He pulled back an inch. "What?" "The SH in the ledger," I said, enunciating every syllable. "It doesn't stand for Senator Harris. It stands for Sherlock Holmes." Julian's mouth opened, but no sound came out. "And JB?" I continued. "James Bond. The coordinates on page 7? Those are the GPS locations for every Wendy's dumpster in a 50-mile radius. I copied them off a sanitation map while you were editing your vlog." Julian froze. The blood drained from his face so fast it looked like he was about to faint. "You," he whispered. "You wrote it?" "I wrote it Tuesday night," I said, "while you were sleeping, while you were dreaming about spending my money." "But Red Vector," Julian stammered. "The buyer, the Russian, I talked to him. He sent the money. He sent you a screenshot of a transfer bar." I corrected him. "A GIF, Julian. An animated picture. I sent it from the guest bedroom while I was napping. I was Red Vector." Julian stared at me. The horror was absolute. He looked at the frail old man on the other side of the glass and finally saw the shark beneath the surface. "You set me up," he breathed. "You framed me." "I didn't frame you. I said calmly. I just gave you the rope. You tied the noose. You stood on the chair. You kicked it away. Why? He croaked. Tears were spilling down his cheeks now. Why would you do this? I was just gonna put you in a home. You touched the books? I said. The temperature in the booth seemed to drop 10 degrees. You cut the plates out of the botanical register, I said, my voice dropping to a whisper that cut through the glass like a diamond drill. You burned the binding of great expectations. You treated my life's work, my wife's legacy, like kindling for your vanity. I leaned in closer until my breath fogged the glass. I have destroyed men for less, Julian. I have toppled governments for less. You are a net, and I swatted you. I'll tell them, Julian gasped. He looked at the guard. I'll tell them everything. I'll tell them you're the mastermind. I smiled. It was a terrifying smile. Go ahead, I said. Tell them. Tell the FBI that the senile grandfather who cries about his lost glasses is actually a super hacker who fabricated a cryptographic ledger and simulated a dark web network just to prank you. Tell them that. Do you know what they'll do? Julian stared at me, trembling. They'll add a psychological evaluation to your file, I said. They'll say you're delusional, narcissistic, paralyzed by the inability to accept your own mediocrity. The more you scream about me, the crazier you look. I checked my watch, a Patek Philippe I usually kept hidden. My time is up, I said. And so is yours. I sat back. I slumped my shoulders. I let my mouth hang open slightly. I brought the tremor back to my hands. I have to go now, I said loudly, into the phone, my voice quavering again. I hope you like the food, Julian. Chloe says she hopes you learn to cook. I hung up the phone. Julian was screaming. He was slamming the receiver against the glass, yelling, "He's lying. He's the devil. Look at him. He's not old. He's not old." The guard moved in instantly. He grabbed Julian by the shoulder and slammed him against the wall. "Control yourself, inmate." I stood up, leaning heavily on my cane. I looked at the guard through the glass and gave a sad, apologetic wave. "I'm sorry," I mouthed to the guard. "He's very confused." The guard nodded sympathetically at me, then dragged the screaming Julian Vance back into the gray bowels of the prison. I turned and walked out of the visiting room. I walked through the metal detectors. I walked out the heavy steel doors and into the bright, blinding sunlight of the parking lot. Agent Miller was waiting by his car to give me a ride home. "How did it go, Mr. Sterling?" he asked. "Did you get closure?" I took a deep breath of fresh air. It tasted sweet. "Yes, Agent," I said. "I think he finally understands." I got into the car. The ledger was closed. The account was settled. The fixer could go back to sleep now. Or perhaps I'd keep one eye open, just in case. 6 months later, the smell of smoke was finally gone. It had been replaced by the rich, earthy scent of beeswax polish and old paper, the perfume of history, and I stood in the center of the library, leaning on my cane, though I found I needed it less these days. The cane was a prop, and like any good actor, I knew when to rest the props. Chloe was on the ladder. She was carefully sliding a volume into the gap on the third shelf. It wasn't the botanical register of 1838 that was gone forever, a casualty of war. It was a 1902 treatise on British flora. Not as valuable, but sturdy, honest, careful with the spine. I instructed, my voice gentle. "I know, Grandpa," she said, not looking down. Her hands were steady. The nervous, flighty energy she used to carry the residue of Julian's manic influence had evaporated. She wore her hair tied back. She wore a smudge of dust on her cheek like a badge of honor. "Support the text block. Never pull from the top." "Good," I said. "You're learning." She climbed down and wiped her hands on her apron. She looked at the shelf. The gaps were filling in. The library didn't look like a crime scene anymore. It looked like a convalescent home for stories. "The lawyer called again," she said, picking up a stack of auction catalogs. "Oh," I walked over to my desk, reclaimed and sanitized. How is Mr. Vance enjoying his new accommodations? He took the plea, she said. 3 years for wire fraud, 2 for grand larceny, consecutive. He'll be out in 5 with good behavior. But, she paused, a small vindictive smile touching her lips. But what? I asked, sitting down. But the spy who baked me thing stuck, she said. The internet doesn't forget. He tries to act tough in there, and the other inmates just ask him for muffin recipes. He's a joke, Grandpa. He's not a martyr. He's a meme. I nodded slowly, satisfied. A martyr inspires followers. A joke inspires only pity. I had given him the worst possible sentence. Irrelevance. And the debts? I asked. The bankruptcy court seized everything he had left, Chloe said. The car, the watches, the studio equipment. It barely covered the legal fees. He's starting from zero. Zero is a good place to start, I said. It builds character. Or so I hear. Chloe walked over and kissed me on the forehead. I'm going to the market. Do you need anything? Tea? Biscuits? Just peace and quiet, my dear, I said. You got it. She left the room, closing the heavy oak doors behind her. I heard the front door open and close. The car engine faded into the distance, that I was alone, that I swiveled my chair around to face the window. The garden was blooming. The roses, which Julian had threatened to trample with his catering tents, were vibrant red that I reached into the bottom drawer of my desk. I pulled out a small velvet pouch. Inside was a single gold Krugerrand. I rolled the coin over my knuckles, left to right to left. A dexterous ripple of gold that no arthritic hand could ever perform. The mask was heavy. Wearing it for 6 months, playing the fool, the victim, the confused old man. It took a toll. But looking at this room, looking at Chloe's newfound strength, I knew it was worth the wait. I had defended the perimeter. I had neutralized the threat. I had balanced the ledger. My eyes drifted to the shelf nearest the fireplace. There, nestled between the Odyssey and the Iliad, was a new edition. It wasn't a rare book. It was a simple, black moleskin notebook that I had bought. A new one that I stood up and walked over to it. I pulled it off the shelf and opened it. It was blank. I took a fountain pen from my pocket. On the first page, in my sharp, angular handwriting, not the shaky scrawl of Grandpa Artie, I wrote a single line. Subject: Julian Vance. Status: closed. I closed the book and placed it back on the shelf. Some men retire to play golf. Some retire to fish. I retired to read. And God help the man who interrupts me again. I walked back to my wingback chair, picked up my copy of The Count of Monte Cristo, and opened it to the final page. All human wisdom is contained in these 2 words: wait and hope. I adjusted my glasses, settled into the leather, and let the silence wash over me. It was the best story I had ever written.